Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T. Calkins Trubergy, also known as Byron of Sidious. I'm making this Storyteller's Perspective commentary in response to some brief interactions that I had as a member of the viewing audience on a live stream by Toasty with the Mosty 69 on YouTube earlier today, that she had Ryan Roger Athe of Reality Based as well on hand co-hosting. And the subject or topic of one Mark Kern, better known online as Grummz or Grummz, or however you want to pronounce his username, his handle on Twitter /X. My familiarity with Grummz, I would say, is middling at best. His name cropped up quite a bit during Gamergate and Gamergate 2, which are topics of pop culture conversation with which I am far more familiar as a video games enthusiast and somebody who, while not an expert in journalism, I would like to consider myself a well-read individual with a capacity for reading comprehension and understanding the nature of bias, non-bias, and the proper practice of the principles of old school journalism. I am not myself a journalist. I am a fiction storyteller, by and large, in fantasy and horror, with a dash of sci-fi here and there. My bona fides in sci-fi are very scant. I've only written a couple of stories in that genre. But in horror and fantasy, I have quite the background. It's my understanding that one of the primary criticisms leveled against Mark Kern is a continued failure to deliver on a proposed crowdfunded video game project, referred to as Project Ember, I believe it is. A kind of mech suit, a mecha suit combat adventure action game that he has been attempting to put together for at least a couple of years. I was not aware of how long this particular campaign of his had been going on, because during the course of the live stream earlier today, Ryan brought up that there are a number of folks, including Cassie of Cult, I think it's Cult Cage Classics is her channel. I'm probably butchering that. I'm probably getting that wrong. Let me actually look it up and get that correct, because I'd rather not get it in error. My apologies to her. It's Cult Classic Cage is the channel in question, who apparently also has hefted heavy criticism at Mr. Kern for his continued and repeated failure to deliver on promises made regarding this crowdfunded project. And I was interested in getting a little bit more information regarding the background of this whole project before I actually put together a response, because my initial instinct in most cases when it comes to someone who is a creative, an artistic creator, is to initially instinctively kind of jump up and try to defend them where possible. And I feel so inclined with programmers and developers unless I am given good reason not to defend them. So I initially said I want to offer some pushback, but, I want to take the opportunity to put together something, and I asked if I could tag the folks from the stream and some folks from the chat if they would be amenable to that, and they said, of course, by all means, including PWG, problematic white guy, John, and I thank those folks for the opportunity to offer this criticism rebuttal. But I will say, I have to tip my hand a little in saying that some of the criticism is well deserved from what I have gathered since then on my breaks at work. In particular, watching a 6-month-old video by the user Upper Echelon, who is a user with whom I sometimes hold disagreement, but who, generally speaking, tends to have thoroughly vetted information to present to support his arguments. And I found his video on the topic of Grummz rather compelling. And given the arguments that he puts forth in that comparison video that he makes comparing Grummz to Zoe Quinn and her Kickstarter/fundraising endeavors, I could very well be called to the mat and be told you shouldn't defend or try to protect this guy, because it's kind of a running joke now that he continues to take the money and run, and that this project is getting backing, yet he continues to fail to meet obligations or promises that he makes whenever there's a new round of funding. That there don't seem to be any tangible results at the tail end. What I will offer in terms of a defense is the following. I understand full well what it is like to be an artistically inclined individual with a project in mind, and to begin working on it, and to come across obstacles, road bumps, and, quite frankly, brick walls. To come up against obstacles that make moving forward at the previously expected rate damned near impossible. There have been a couple of times where I have started fiction projects with the idea in mind that I will be complete with a story, from outline to final written and edited and completed final draft, in a set amount of time. I usually give myself somewhere between 6 months to 18 months, depending on the expected scope of a project. If it's a full-length Temerarian tale novel of high fantasy, I usually give myself a year to a year and a half. If it's a short story collection, I give myself 6 months to a year. If it's a novella-length horror project or fantasy project, or even sci-fi in a couple of cases, I'll give myself a year to a year and a half to go from outline to finished final draft. I have missed this self-guided deadline numerous times throughout the course of my career as a semi-professional author. Numerous times I have whiffed. I have missed the mark and taken far longer than initially hoped. The most recent example I can think of is the Temerarian tale Not So Epic, which is finally available for purchase. I'll put the link to that listing in trade paperback below, as well as the link for the ebook version, which is considerably more affordable. Again, I'll take a moment for Shameless self-promotion. The links for those are in the description of this video. But when I initially began writing that story, I started writing it in 2016. And I gave myself the usual deadline of about 1.5 years. I wanted to have that book out and ready and available. I just finally got it on market available a couple of weeks ago. It took almost 10 years to finally be satisfied to the point where I was willing to put that book out and available for sale. Now, I initially published it on my Substack in chapter by chapter posts, but I didn't do that until about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. It wasn't ready to be shown to the public for damn near 8 years. When I had an initial expectation set for myself of 1.5 years at worst. Anyone who dabbles or works with conviction in an artistic medium can tell you sometimes what you expect to be able to accomplish in a given time period just isn't going to happen. You either get distracted with other projects, other concepts. You might have contractual obligations to complete other works first, or work in collaboration with other people. And mind you, this is just for a singular person. What Grummz, Mark Kern, is working on is a video game. An artistic product that requires the efforts and input of numerous people. And there may very well be certain variables that he's not in control of. If he is farmed out or contracted out certain elements or aspects of this game of his to be worked on and produced by other people, then he has to rely on their capacity, ability, and willingness to put in the effort and the work to accomplish the goals and timeline set frameworks that he sets for them. And if they can't, he either has to extend their time or replace them. And that's going to take time and money. Now, to be fair, as much as I wish to use that to defend him, these are things that Mr. Kern should have considered before setting promised dates of completion while formulating his crowdfunding. Me writing a book is a far different exercise than Grummz leading the production of a video game. I can do what I am aiming toward completely on my own, outside of final edits. I almost always turn my manuscript over to somebody else for final edits. Because at that point, I either cannot trust myself to be willing to say, it's good enough, I'm finally done, because I'm often my own worst critic. Or I'm at the point where I know something's wrong, but I can't quite see it, and I know that. So I need another person's input. I need them to hold my feet to the fire. The people who are funding Grummz's project here, they have every right and reason to hold his feet to the fire. And this is where I'm probably going to get growled or grumbled at from the very folks who I'm hoping will listen to this presentation, and a couple of the folks who I'm going to tag for this video. They may want to snarl at me when I say, if you're not one of the financial backers for Grummz's project, you have far less room to bitch and complain about the pace at which he's working, because you don't have anything at stake. True, he is damaging the conversation around independent artistic creators. And he is contributing to some of the very pop cultural problems that he himself grumbles and growls about. But unless he is directly impacting you financially or impacting your personal reputation, you have a lot less room to gripe and bitch. And I would ask you to either extend some grace or hold your tongue momentarily. If you're going to comment, do so with the light shining behind or from the side to expose to those you're talking to, hey, I hold X, Y, or Z opinion, but I don't actually have any dog in this fight. If you feel that you do, explain what your dog is in this fight. Elsewise, you're just talking to stir up trouble. You're free to do so. But if you have no grounds to do so, I am free as a listener or viewer to say, I don't care that much about your opinion on this because you don't have a dog in this fight. Now, another reason why I am choosing to say anything in regards to Grummz and his situation is that part of the reason I can't completely stand in front of him and hold up the shield to defend him is because it seems, from what I have seen on X/Twitter, and what some folks have commented on quite accurately, is that while Grummz is taking the opportunity to comment on current events sociopolitically surrounding the gaming subculture and this aspect of pop culture, he's not taking the time that he's spending on X or Twitter or showing up on panel shows on YouTube and elsewhere to discuss these things. He could be using that time to work on his game. This thing has almost been in development hell as long as Duke Nukem Forever at this point. We all know, if we've played that game or watched others play it, it doesn't always benefit a project to be given constant extensions of time to work on something. Sometimes the end result is not good. For a fine example, I would ask you to compare the end product of Obsidian working on Fallout New Vegas in the short-ass time frame they had to do that work, as opposed to the folks at Firewalker Studios and how much time they had to work on Concord. They had a decade. All right? What was the result there? A live service game that died in less than 3 weeks. Obsidian, they had a year and a half to pump out an entire Fallout game. What did they get? One of the most beloved entries into that timeless series ever, despite all its bugs and glitches. Nothing quite like shooting a Deathclaw in the face just to watch it twist around in a tilt-a-whirl eternally 6 feet off the ground and have all of its collision detection removed, and you can walk right through this cyclone spinning thing floating in the air. Saw that more than a few times playing the game. What am I getting at? I'm getting at, I want to defend Mark Kern as an artist because I understand the challenges of creating an artistic product. I understand that firsthand as an author. You can have all the expectations in the world, but things are going to crop up to make it impossible to meet those expectations. And you have to manage them if you're honest with yourself. The difference between Kern and myself, I'm not being crowdfunded when I create a new book. I outline the story, I write the story, I edit the story, I rewrite the story, I rip it apart, I reassemble, I draft a third time. If necessary, I rip apart and redraft a fourth time. The highest number of drafts I've ever done on a story was 6. 6 drafts. Some projects I have set aside for years for fear that I'm just not ready or able to tell that story the way it needs to be told. Has anybody stopped to ask Mark Kern, hey, when you started this project, did you really feel like you were ready to take on the challenges that come with it? Did you prepare for the roadblocks that you might find yourself bumping up against? Because for all of the critiques, for all of the jabs and the jokes, I have yet to hear anybody ask the question, did he know what he was getting himself into with this project? Someone should ask him. Someone far more notable than myself. And maybe a conversation can be had from there. In terms of if this message were to somehow make its way to Grummz, the following I would say to him. Sir, the folks who have financially supported your efforts since you announced this Project Ember, you owe them answers. You owe them an explanation for the many delays and shortfalls. Not every artistic endeavor will succeed. We all know that. But don't trap yourself in the endless death spiral of editing as you write. Because as any author will tell you, if you try to edit while you're writing, you'll never finish your story. Get the thing done and then go back and fine-tune it when you're finished. Because that is part of the process. Create the art, then refine it. That's all for now, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for listening to this ramble. I ask that you take care of yourselves, and as always, keep reading.